Well, that was unexpected. It seemed so settled, so calm. As far as Lions squad go, this was going to be as predictable as they came. Maybe 4 or 5 positions were still up in the air, still in contention. The big name exclusions even, we kind of knew were coming. There were fewer 50-50s this time than usual, and the endless bolter chat was just everyone getting excited. That happens. It's Lions time, everyone gets excited. It's entirely fine this happens, but now the squad announcement is finally here. Everything's going to snap back to being normal, and just as we predicted...
Bundy Aki, Connaught Rugby, Ireland.
The second name read out, and oh my god, suddenly all bets were off. Warren Gatland proceeded to roll out a squad so wildly unpredictable. By the end, if Hamish Watson had lost his spot to a cartoon drawing of a pig, I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. If someone had suggested Warren Gatland might select that squad on Twitter, I would have rolled my eyes and scrolled straight past. This was the most unpredictable, individualistic, esoteric Lions squad in living memory, filled with outside picks and unusual shouts. So, very quickly, let's run through the headlines. Bundy Aki is in despite his Six Nations looking something like this. Elliot Daly is in despite the experimental dick finger surgery. Alan Wynne Jones can teleport now. No Kyle Sinclair, no George Ford or John Van Sextramp. Josh Navidi, Sam Underhill and CJ Stander are going to have an awful lot of time to play FIFA this summer. Warren and John the Fox Davis have officially broken up in a move that has thrilled Brian O'Driscoll. Jack Conan is going to need to cancel his summer holiday, and not just for lockdown reasons. Pirates henchman Johnny Hill has been preferred to lumpy lock protege James Ryan, and most surprisingly of all, the mad lads at BT Sport were right all along. Samuel David Simmons is going to be a British and Irish Lion. So, all of that leaves us with just one question. What, how, why, where, how, what, when, no, sorry, what, and why, and also how, but mostly, what is Warren Gatland thinking, but more importantly, what might he be planning? Now, an awful lot of the reaction to this squad has come because we, as fans, look at the Lions in a certain way, and I think almost all of us, myself included, are guilty of this. We think of the British and Irish Lions squad that is named every 4 years as being the 37 best players from 4 countries. It's an all-star team, akin to picking a Fantasy 15 of the best players in the world whose name doesn't have an E in it. However, this tour isn't Live Aid or Super Smash Bros. It's not about assembling a superstar group of individuals. It's a tour with one objective and one objective only: to beat Razzie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber's World Cup winning Springbok team at least twice. So, what Warren Gatland has assembled, with all due respect to the players selected, is not a list of the 37 best players in Britain and Ireland, and you can tell that because Stephen Myler isn't on it. This, instead, is a squad of players that he thinks can execute a game plan that might beat the Springboks. Just look at the surprise picks, the bolters if you will, if you want to use that word. Not one of them is there by default because there isn't a better option. Nobody is in because another player is out of form or injured. Maybe one exception, but we'll get to that. Every player in this squad has been selected, chosen deliberately. Johnny Hill hasn't tripped over and fallen into the team. Gatland has decided what he brings suits this side better than what James Ryan or Johnny Gray brings. Likewise, Sam Simmons, Jack Conan, Xander Ferguson, Gareth Davis. There are endless selections that might seem mad to some in isolation, but in context with the rest of the squad, things start to slot together and make sense, because every single member of this team is a choice by Gatland, Townsend and Tandy, who seem to have a clear system they want to implement. So, what might the system be, and what is this context that the squad provides? Number 8 is perhaps the most telling position. Pre-tour favourites behind perennial superhuman class bot Talupe Faletau were CJ Stander, Billy Vanapola and Josh Navidi. And instead, Warren Gatland went with the aforementioned Faletau plus Sam Simmons and Jack Conan, who don't start for their countries. What do these three have in common? Well, a few things that start to make their selections make far more sense. For one, they're all quick. This means all three are most regularly used by their teams in a wide channel as what's known as an edge forward, whereas the likes of Stander, Navidi and Vanapola are all best utilised to make big disposable carries near the ruck in the middle of the field. This squad suggests the Lions are going to play their number 8 in a role close to how Wales used Faletau in this Six Nations. They operated in a shape that had him, Faletau, and another forward exactly who would change, but here it's Adam Beard out on the wing. This allowed them to use Faletau in a more explosive role, trying to give him time on the ball, not just thankless carries in midfield. This squad suggests Gatland intends to play his number 8 as an edge forward in the wide channels rather than as someone who carries up the middle. And to this end, not only do Conan and Simmons selections make perfect sense, Simmons is very, very quick, very explosive, scores a lot of tries, and Conan is actually more of a specialist edge forward than he is number 8. That's almost his position, is that he plays as an edge forward. But it also explains Gatland's decisions in the centre, as it opens up the need for someone to carry in midfield. And once Warren pulled himself away from his saliva-smeared photo of Jamie Roberts and noticed it's a day ending in a Y, so obviously Manu Tuolangi's injured, this left him with two real options. Robbie Henshaw, who had a fantastic Six Nations, and Bundy Archie, who also played in the Six Nations. These are both backs capable of sliding into a forward pod to act as an extra back row forward to carry, something both Wales and England were doing during the Six Nations, using their backs as an extra forward. Essentially, my gut tells me Gatland is going to entrust an awful lot of the traditional number 8 role of a big carrier who smashes it up to the centres, and the number 8 will act something more, almost like an extra back, as that kind of edge forward out wide. They want to use it in a far more dynamic way. And when you start to look at it like that, once that element of the game plan's in mind, Faletau, Simmons and Conan feel like fairly obvious selections. Navidi, Stander and Vanapola, by comparison, are far more old school and, frankly, if we say it, slow, and would stick out in this squad like Talupe's thumb. Likewise, the locks appear to be based on a set of criteria rather than their quality. James Ryan's fitness may have counted against him, but it's more likely he simply isn't in because he isn't the right kind of player. By all accounts, Johnny Hill is a great tired lock at scrum time, and that'll help hugely against the Springbok team who, lest we forget, are capable of doing this to England, who had maybe the second best pack in that World Cup. But it's this kind of moment that Warren will be looking at. Timing and giving a pass in a position similar to where I highlighted Adam Beard earlier, if the Lions are going to play in a similar shape. Johnny Hill looks like the kind of guy who would steal a kid's skateboard, but for all the shithousery, it's easy to forget he has a really good pair of hands, as do all of the second rows in this squad. So I guess they're going to be used as link men in attack, either in the means of Beard and Hill here, or just as kind of first receiver type roles. But of course, there's also one evergreen element of second row play that really stands out in this team: the line out. And it's clearly not a coincidence that every single member of the back five, the second row and the back row, selected in this squad is a recognised line-out jumper. Whilst the likes of Stander, Navidi, Underhill can jump at the line-out, none of them are specialists, because they're all kind of too big to be anything but clunky in the air. The Springboks lost only one line out across the full World Cup, which was against Warren Gatland's Wales, and stole more than anybody else, so the Lions have to be primed and prepared, and that appears to have been a huge concern for Gatland. To move on to the backs, I think one kind of exception to the things I've said about deliberateness was named right after Archie, the second surprise of the day, Elliot Daly. Daly had been counted out of contention after having what you could call a sloppy Six Nations, but the interesting thing is that he is not listed as a fullback, which is where he's been playing for England for the last few years, but as a centre. To me, this says he's clearly just in as a direct replacement for George North, who would have made the squad but for injury. This also explains why the Lions coaches attended Saracens' game against Doncaster a few weeks ago. I wondered at the time if Pride of Nottingham Jack Spittle was going to be in contention, but it turns out it was kind of because Elliot Daly was playing his first game at 13 in several years, and he kind of tore it up. Daly is acting as a fourth centre who can cover the back three, and Gatland loves a utility player. If he gets knocked himself playing at like Amt Hill Rugby Club or something, we're probably looking at Jack Nowell coming into the next utility back instead of Ringrose, Halfpenny or Spittle as the next centre, fullback or wing. Otherwise, if you try and write that backline down on paper and look at it as a team who will play together and adopt a certain style of rugby, there's one name that really sticks out and doesn't fit in, and that name is Connor Murray. Murray is the best scrum half available and kind of too good to not pick in the squad for what is probably the weakest position for the Lions, but he's the one player who doesn't slot into the fast-paced hybrid rugby this squad seems to be wanting to play. The other players all fit a certain mould. The centres are good defenders who can operate as extra forwards in attack. The fullbacks are both fond of counter-attack and beyond solid under the high ball. The fly halves are all individuals who have a distinctive style of play. George Ford and Jules Holland Sex Omnibus are more conduit type players players who try to unlock the rest of the team and get the best out of them and adapt to what is needed, but the 310s Gatland has selected like to put their own stamp on the game. They play very much in their own way at all times. And whereas Eddie Jones or Wayne Pivac like a back three to balance themselves out, Gatland's policy with Wales was always just to chuck in some lads who are class and we'll see how it works. So we have 4 wingers with wildly varying styles of play. Josh Adams is the technically perfect all-rounder. Louis Rees-Zammit is lightning quick, get out your seats, box office boy. Anthony Watson is sharp as he is sound. Whilst Duan van der Merwe is a bit like entering a tower block into It's a Knockout. Certain agility tasks it might struggle with, but good luck bowling it over by throwing a sponge at it. The one other thing this backline all have in common is ability in the contact area. Louis Rees-Zammit is the only player in that 37-man squad who isn't a notable force on their own ball at the breakdown, who didn't put in at least a few really key impactful clearouts during the Six Nations. Well, I mean, him and Sam Simmons, but Eddie Jones already pissed off enough today that we won't get into that. This is a backline who are all excellent at clearing out in a ruck. And this is something that I think likely counted against Johnny May, Gary Ringrose and George Ford, who are, to put it lightly, not that. It's a squad that poses lots of questions, but hidden in amongst it are so many more answers than I think we would have got in the side most of us were expecting. I want to try and do a proper deep dive into how the Lions might play in terms of shape and tactics based on Gatland and Townsend's previous experience, as well as the squad we're seeing here down the line, and kind of go into it in proper details. I'm not quite here, but that's all because it's finally time to actually see the Lions play rugby. It's finally time to put the debate behind us. The 50-50s can be forgotten in favour of us as fans uniting, just as this squad now must do, to become not a supergroup of individuals, but a cohesive team who are all on the same side and ready to take on the Springboks. Thank you for watching. I've obviously knocked that in 24 hours, so I do want to go into, as I mentioned, more detail on trying to work out how the Lions will play based on Townsend, based on Gatland, based on this squad's previous experience, based on Tandy's defence as well, and try and look over how they actually might approach playing the Springboks. That was just kind of a taster, I guess, but there's plenty more on the channel. There's reports on pretty much every Six Nations game, including the fun of the Women's Six Nations. There are a couple of videos on the Springboks. I'd love to do more on them, but obviously there's a problem in the fact they haven't played ahead of this Lions tour. And there's plenty more around. I've been doing podcasts on the 2011 Rugby World Cup, and there is today going up a video on the much discussed, very controversial Australia v South Africa game, in which we go into some depth on both Bryce Lawrence as a referee and the way the two teams played. If anyone wants to go and listen to that, it's on all the various podcast devices. Otherwise, I'll see you very soon for more rugby stuff.
Chris, firstly, congratulations, British and Irish Lion. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre, to be honest. Obviously, absolutely delighted. I really wasn't expecting. It's just.
Surprise, motherfucker. You watching my brand new show. Surprise, motherfucker. What's Chris Harris? And motherfucker, you been surprised.